What are we covering on the Israel-Hamas War, day 136? The IDF may believe that Shiri Bibas and her two children, 4-year-old Ariel and Kfir, who was 10 months old when he was kidnapped, have been killed in the Gaza Strip. 107 Palestinians were reported killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. The Gaza death toll crosses 29,000. The IDF published a summary today of its aerial activity, noting that over 29,000 bombing raids were carried out in the Gaza Strip since the war began. The IDF also estimates that 12,000 Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives have been killed in the Gaza Strip. The United States is circulating a UN Security Council resolution calling for a temporary ceasefire, among others rejecting the buffer zone that Israel is creating in Gaza and stating that a ground invasion into Rafah should not proceed at this time. Hello everyone. I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It's currently the evening of February 19th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of February 20th, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, the IDF may believe that Shiri Bibas and her two children, 4-year-old Ariel and Kfir, who was 10 months old when he was kidnapped, have been killed in the Gaza Strip. The IDF published a video today that it found from security cameras in eastern Khan Yunis, showing the mother and her two children being transferred between kidnappers on or right after October 7th. After publishing the video, the IDF stated, "There is grave concern for their well-being," which commonly is the language that the IDF uses when the military suspects that someone is dead, however doesn't have enough evidence to determine it. The IDF has used this several times with regards to hostages, stating that there is grave concern for their well-being, and several days later, after the IDF gathered more evidence, stating that they in fact are confirmed dead. Shiri Bibas and her kids seem to have been held by one of the other terror groups in the Gaza Strip, the al-Mujahideen brigades. The IDF stated today that Hamas is still holding Amit Bibas, the father of the family. Hamas previously stated on November 29th already that Shiri Bibas and her two children were killed in an IDF bombing, later publishing a video of Amit Bibas, the father of the children, who was stating that his kids were killed in the bombings. However, this is the first time that the IDF is possibly confirming these statements of Hamas. Other news relating to the hostage situation: there are ongoing blows being traded between Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel and Qatar. After yesterday, Netanyahu called on international pressure to be leveled against Qatar, who could in turn apply pressure on Hamas to reach a hostage deal. Today, the Qatari Foreign Ministry stated that Netanyahu's statements are a new attempt to prolong the war, adding that Qatar has been committed to negotiating a hostage release from day one, and that Qatar asked Netanyahu to focus on the negotiations and on helping regional security, rather than on his narrow political agenda and internal political crises. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there was a barrage of rockets sent from the Gaza Strip targeting southern parts of Israel today. These targeted the areas of Eshkol, specifically near Oz, Nirim, and Ein HaShlosha. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, in the central parts of the Gaza Strip, there were several reports of substantial bombing raids within the areas of Deir el-Balah. One of these reports noted the bombardment against the house that resulted in dozens of Palestinian casualties. There were also other bombing raids that were reported in the el-Nusseirat refugee camp, targeting different structures. According to some reports on the ground, 8 Palestinians were killed in these attacks. It was not specifically reported what the targets of those bombings were. The bulk of the fighting remains in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip in Khan Yunis. The IDF is continuing its activity in western Khan Yunis, as well as its operation in the Nasser hospital. Substantial gun battles were reported throughout western Khan Yunis as IDF forces continued to excavate different weapons warehouses of Hamas. In addition, there were different gun battles that were reported and substantial drone activity of the IDF. The operation in Nasser hospital continues as well. Up until now, it has been reported that 70 of the hospital's staff have either been arrested or taken for questioning. In addition to this, the IDF has reportedly arrested 200 Palestinians within the hospital, stating that most of them were in fact Hamas members and some of them were actually masquerading as medical staff. In addition to this, there are reports that the hospital is still suffering from a lot of fighting within it. So there are reports that several patients have died as a result of being moved around to different places and equipment failure, as well as failures of the generators in the hospital. Al-Qassam brigades reported firing mortars in Khan Yunis and targeting a house where 15 IDF soldiers were held up, reporting that fires broke out in the area and several IDF soldiers were injured in this attack. Regarding other news from the Gaza Strip, Reuters reported that 4 different officials who are involved in the military strategy of the Gaza Strip, stating that 2 of them are Israeli and 2 of them are regional, stated today that their intense military activity in the Gaza Strip will continue for another 6 to 8 weeks. A different report cited these 4 different military strategists, stating that Israel would hope to continue for at least 6 to 8 weeks, so it is unclear what exactly was stated by these 4 sources. Possibly related to this, the IDF stated today that preparation for the Rafah invasion may take several weeks due to the logistical considerations of evacuating the civilian population from the area. Al-Akhbar, which is a Hezbollah-affiliated news site in Lebanon, reported that Egypt has proposed being involved in the transfer of Palestinian civilians from Rafah to other areas in the Gaza Strip, and that this idea was not entirely rejected by the United States. So it has been reported in the last several days that Egypt may be building a compound within the eastern parts of Sinai in the event that Palestinians end up bursting through the border to try to take refuge in Rafah. Possibly because of this, or in trying to circumvent this, Egypt is trying to propose that they will be involved in actually moving civilians from one area of Rafah to another area within the Gaza Strip. Other news, after Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant stated that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, has in fact lost contact with the external leadership, and the external leadership of Hamas is trying to actually replace him. This has been denied by Hamas for several days already. Today there were more rejections that came in, as Hamas stated that Yahya Sinwar is still functioning as the leader in the Gaza Strip, and that Yoav Gallant's statements are cheap psychological warfare of Israel. Other news, the IDF published an extensive summary of its military activity since the war began, which I'm going to reference several times throughout this report. The sections regarding Gaza, the report noted that the IDF Air Force has carried out over 29,000 bombing raids in the Gaza Strip since the war began. 7,000 of these are what are known as flash attacks, which are attacks that are supporting the ground units during active combat. Now, some reports from last month, specifically from the Wall Street Journal and then others, noted that the IDF may have dropped over 45,000 missiles, amounting to 65,000 tons of bombs in the Gaza Strip. This does not inherently contradict what the IDF is saying. The IDF is reporting 29,000 bombing raids, however, it is not saying how many bombs or missiles were dropped in each one of these, so possibly these different reports actually go together. Possibly not, possibly as different sources. It remains to be seen. Regarding casualties, no IDF soldier was reported killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, leaving the total number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began on 236. One IDF soldier was reported injured in the Gaza Strip. The total number of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began is 1,374. The Palestinian Health Ministry is reporting that 107 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians who were killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 29,092. That number crossed 29,000 today. 69,028 Palestinians are reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the war began. The IDF summary that was published today stated that the IDF estimates that roughly 12,000 Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other terrorist operatives have been killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began. Some of the reports that were quoting different IDF sources said 12,000 out of the 29,000, so it is possible that the estimates of the IDF actually are quite similar to those of the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip regarding how many Palestinians have been killed. However, the official report has not actually been published. It was only reported on by different news agencies. What was reported in all the news agencies is that the IDF is estimating that roughly 12,000 Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other terrorist operatives were killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, the UN is reporting that there are increasing cases of different diseases, specifically meningitis, acute diarrhea, and other infectious diseases, spreading through the Gaza refugee camps, noting that upwards of 500,000 cases of these different diseases have been reported in the last weeks. There is also an increasing hunger that is reported in the different camps. The UN agencies noted specifically that this is particularly impacting some 50,000 pregnant women within the different refugee camps, primarily in the areas surrounding the town of Rafah. Other news, the UN Human Rights Commission published a report today expressing grave concern over the mistreatment of Palestinian women and girls by the IDF, citing 2 cases where Palestinian women were raped while in custody of the IDF. The report notes that the cases of possible sexual violence during arrest also are being heard from different Palestinian women, and that other forms of mistreatment and possibly even death is being reported despite Palestinians evacuating to different safe zones. The Israeli foreign minister fervently rejected these claims, calling them a vile lie, citing that no evidence is produced in the report and not even stated where or when the alleged cases of rape did occur, if they even occurred in the West Bank or in the Gaza Strip. That is the response of Israel to this report of the UN Human Rights Commission. Other news relating to the humanitarian situation, the Nitzana crossing was blocked again today by the Tzav 9 protests in Israel. UNRWA spokesperson Adnan Abu Hassanah stated today that since the protests in Israel began, the number of aid trucks entering the Gaza Strip has dropped significantly. Relating to this, the Palestinian Red Crescent reported today that yesterday 123 aid trucks managed to enter the Gaza Strip through the Kerem Shalom crossing, while none entered through Rafah since the Nitzana crossing was blocked. So just to explain, the Nitzana crossing is a crossing between Israel and Egypt. Aid trucks that want to come in through Rafah have to first go through the Nitzana crossing for security inspections, then can come to Rafah, and thus, if the Nitzana crossing is closed, no aid can enter through the Rafah crossing. Moving on to the situation in the West Bank, there was a Palestinian attack reported near the Burqa village today. An explosive charge was reportedly thrown at an Israeli car that was driving past. One person was injured. In turn, there were 2 settler attacks that were reported. One of these occurred in the Hawara area, where a group of settlers raided an auto repair shop in the village of Hawara, smashing cars and torching others. 10 vehicles are reportedly damaged. In addition, it was also reported there was another settler attack in the area of the Burqa village. There were very little reports about what actually happened. Some of the footage that came out showed that several cars were also torched in the areas of Burqa. However, there's no actual report of how many settlers participated, if anyone was injured, or what happened in that village. Regarding IDF activities, substantial IDF activity reported throughout the West Bank. Some notable operations occurred in the areas of Kabatia, Ras Karkar, El Bire, Kadum, and Hebron. Weapons were reportedly confiscated in these different operations, and a total of 22 Palestinians were arrested in these different operations in the last 22 hours. Regarding the reports from the IDF states that 3,150 Palestinians have been arrested in the West Bank since the war began. Of these, 1,350 are reportedly Hamas operatives. The Palestinian Prisoner Club cites this number as far higher, saying that upwards of 6,000 Palestinians have been arrested in the West Bank since the war began. Other news relating to the West Bank: after its activity in the Kabatia refugee camp yesterday, the IDF reportedly left leaflets in the area calling upon people to not let violent operatives continue to ruin their lives, specifically noting that their lives and the lives of their loved ones will be destroyed the more the violent activity operates in the camp. The leaflet concluded by wishing the people a Ramadan Kareem and also adding phone numbers of the IDF if people want to report violent activity. Another note from the IDF summary is that the IDF also carried out 30 air raid attacks in the West Bank since the war began. This is relatively unprecedented. The IDF has not carried out substantial aerial activity in the West Bank since the Second Intifada, which is upwards of 20 years ago. Since the war began, over 30 air raids have been carried out. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, there were barrages of rockets sent from Lebanon, although again, still less than there were in the escalations that had occurred last week. Rockets targeted the areas of Zarit. Hezbollah claimed an attack against IDF outposts in the Upper Galilee. In addition, there was a drone that crashed in the area of the Kinneret, that is the Sea of Galilee, in the Lower Galilee area, after there were alerts of drone attacks throughout the north. Regarding IDF activity, the IDF carried out an unusual and substantial attack in the areas of Al-Razian, which is near Sidon. This is very deep into Lebanon, some 60 kilometers from the border. The IDF reported that it targeted weapons warehouses of Hezbollah. The IDF also stated this was in retaliation to the drone attack that targeted the Lower Galilee area. Al-Ahmar and El-Miadin, which are both Hezbollah affiliated news sites, reported that the warehouses were actually a warehouse of a generator factory, and that the other one belonged to a metal factory, and that the attacks caused substantial damage to both these factories. In addition to this, other IDF activity was reported as warplanes attacked Hezbollah military infrastructures in the areas of Meruhin. The IDF reported that several Hezbollah operatives were killed in this attack. Other attacks targeted the Hezbollah infrastructure in the areas of Misal Jabal and El Adaisa, as well as in Adaharia. Launching sites in the Tehran village were also reportedly attacked. Al-Ahbar reported that a drone attack was carried out between the areas of Beit Lif and Yatar, and Al-Miadin also reported there were attacks in the El Bustan area. Other news: Hezbollah Lebanese parliamentarian Hassan Fadlallah stated today that every inch of Israel is under the missile map of Hezbollah, and that the fronts of Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and the Red Sea are united to stop the aggression against Gaza. Related to Hezbollah's preparation for war, the French Libération newspaper published an extensive report today about the tunnel network that has been built by Hezbollah dating back to 2006, so almost 20 years. Reportedly, the tunnel network has been constructed under the guise of civil construction and agricultural projects. It is estimated to run hundreds of kilometers and be much larger than Hamas's network of tunnels, also buried much deeper, in some cases 40 to 80 meters under the ground, and specifically underneath rocks. It is noted that the tunnels were constructed using North Korean technology, and that in some cases since October 7th, the IDF dropped white phosphorus bombs in the areas of Lebanon in order to destroy the vegetation that was covering these tunnel entrances, and the newspaper also notes that 12 tunnel entrances were uncovered in this way and were bombed. They reported that that some of these tunnels are strategic tunnels, that is, tunnels that have in them either weapons warehouses or command centers, and some of them are attack tunnels. Those are closer to the surface and are just used for attack. According to the report, the longest one may span as much as 45 kilometers, which is, I'm going to say, roughly 30 miles, and that it may connect the different parts within Lebanon. The report also notes that these tunnels are buried so deep into the rock that bombing them may actually result in earthquakes above ground. Other news, in the IDF summary that was published today, the IDF noted that some 1,100 Air Force bombing raids were carried out in Lebanon since the war began. It also adds that roughly 2,300 rockets have been fired from Lebanon, and 900 drones and aerial attacks from different regions, including Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, have been sent towards Israel, noting that less than 20 of these managed to enter Israeli airspace. It is noteworthy that while those figures, 2,300 rockets and 900 drones, are noted in the IDF report, the IDF does not report how many anti-tank missiles were sent from Lebanon towards Israel, and these have been the bulk of el-Balah attacks in recent weeks. Moving on to some of the regional developments, the Houthis carried out an attack today against a ship that was reportedly, possibly carrying ammonia through the Gulf of Aden. Houthi spokesperson Yahya Saria stated that the ship was badly damaged and that the Houthis ensured that the crew evacuated safely, adding that the ship may drown. Nautical security companies confirmed that the ship was badly damaged and is in danger of drowning, adding that the crew did in fact evacuate. This is the first time that a crew has had to abandon ship as a result of Houthi attacks. In addition to this, a U.S.-owned cargo ship sailing under a Greek banner called for assistance following a missile attack 93 nautical miles off the coast of Aden. British security company Ombre reported that the crew was not hurt and that the ship is still sailing. In addition to this, Al Mayadin reported today that a US-UK attack was carried out in the El Qadan region of the Hudaydah district. It was not reported what exactly was targeted. The EU announced today that it will send a joint task force to the Red Sea in order to facilitate in protecting ships in the region. One more report relating to the regional developments. Egypt announced today that its proceeds from the Suez Canal have dropped by between 40 and 50% as a result of the attacks in the Red Sea. Egypt has tried in the last several months to put pressure on Iran to stop the Houthi attacks simply for this economic reason. This is the first time that Egypt is stating the extent to which it has suffered financial loss as a result of the Houthi operations. Moving on to some of the political and general trends for the last 24 hours, the United States is putting forth a proposed resolution in the UN Security Council countering Algeria's proposed resolution for a complete ceasefire. The United States resolution condemns October 7th and calls on Hamas and other terror groups to grant humanitarian access to hostages and secure their release. In addition to that, it calls for a temporary ceasefire in the Gaza Strip as soon as is practical, based on the formula of all hostages being released. In addition to that, the U.S. proposed Security Council resolution adds, and I quote, "Under the current circumstances, a major ground offensive into Rafah would result in further harm to civilians and further displacement," explicitly stating such a major ground offensive should not proceed under the current circumstances. The proposal also explicitly rejects forced displacement of Palestinians and condemns government ministers in Israel for calling for the resettlement of the Gaza Strip. It also condemns the buffer zone that Israel has been creating within the Gaza Strip and states that the Gaza Strip is a whole unit and cannot be divided or chipped away at. In addition, it also notes the heightened tensions in the West Bank and Jerusalem leading up to Ramadan as an impetus for accepting this resolution. This resolution runs counter to many things that are very important to Israel and was reported in Israel as something that is going to threaten Israel's interest in the war. Several hours later, a senior official was quoted in Reuters stating that the U.S. will not be rushed with this proposal and that there's still room for negotiations. So this may be a tactic that the United States is using. The U.S. has been trying to find ways to compel Prime Minister Netanyahu to throw his weight into the hostage negotiations instead of the current situation where Netanyahu is actually not allowing Israeli delegates to even participate in the hostage negotiations. It is possible that the United States is putting this resolution forward, but saying there's room to negotiate it, i.e. trying to signal to the Israeli government, you can still change this resolution, but you have to actually take action in the direction that the United States would like to see. Other political news in the last 24 hours. The International Court of Justice, the ICJ, has begun debating the case that was brought forth by the Palestinian Authority already last year, where the Palestinian Authority is requesting the ICJ's opinion on the legality of Israeli occupation in the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority Foreign Minister, Riyad al-Maliki, stated today in the court there is an active genocide going on in the Gaza Strip and an apartheid in the West Bank, and that Palestinians have been denied the basic human rights of life for too long. While Israel did not send a representation to the court, and Prime Minister Netanyahu specifically today put out a statement stating that Israel does not recognize the legitimacy of the debate, Israel reportedly did send a written response to the court, stating, among other things, that the court should refrain from dealing with this, and that any opinion given at this stage will harm any attempt to reach negotiated settlement between Israel and the Palestinians in the future. In addition to this, there's a brewing diplomatic crisis going on between Israel and Brazil surrounding the war. Yesterday, Brazilian President Lula da Silva stated that Israel is carrying out a genocide in Gaza, adding that this is akin to Hitler's decision to destroy the Jews. This was widely condemned within Israel. Israel, in response, declared that da Silva is a persona non grata in Israel. Brazil, in turn, recalled its ambassador from Israel. Moving on to the future of the Gaza Strip, Israel's finance minister and head of religious Zionism, Bezalel Smotrich, called on the Prime Minister of Israel today to announce that any unilateral decision, such as the impeding unilateral decision that is being reported that the U.S. may take to recognize a Palestinian state, will be met with Israeli unilateral decisions. He specifically noted that if a Palestinian state is recognized unilaterally, Israel should in turn unilaterally cancel the Oslo agreements, stop the transfer of tax money to the Palestinian Authority, and eventually dissolve the Palestinian Authority, i.e. return to direct occupation of all Palestinians in the West Bank, rather than the minimal autonomy that some Palestinians have in what is considered Area A within the West Bank, that is the main Palestinian cities, where the Palestinian Authority has most of the control. In addition to this, as has been done in nearly every day in the last week, Prime Minister Netanyahu also put out his own statement today regarding the possibility of international recognition, specifically U.S. recognition of a Palestinian state. He stated that forcing a Palestinian state upon Israel will endanger Israel's existence. He added, and I quote, "In any circumstances, with or without negotiated resolution to the conflict, Israel will maintain full security control west of the Jordan River. This, of course, includes Judea and Samaria and the Gaza Strip." Judea and Samaria is the official name in Israel for the West Bank. Netanyahu also added after that, quote, "Everyone knows that I am the one who has stopped the establishment of a Palestinian state for dozens of years. This may relate to what was reported several weeks ago that U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken suspects that Prime Minister Netanyahu may actually want an open confrontation with the United States over this, since he wants to be seen in Israel as the one who is standing in front of the United States and hoping to actually stop the establishment of a Palestinian state, and that this will help him in a bid for elections later on. Possibly because of this, Netanyahu is starting to put out these statements almost every day, showing that he is the one who is standing in the face of U.S. pressure to develop a Palestinian state. If you enjoy these summaries, please do remember to subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when summaries are published. Give a like. If you have any questions or comments, please do leave them in the comment section below. That is the report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.